building on these figures that we've produced over the previous tutorials, and hopefully you've been having a go at, what we're going to do now is to pull some of them together in a nice landscape scene. And this, as you can see, is a nice sunlit square. It's actually in Venice, that was taken not so long ago. Right, now I don't want to spend too much time on the drawing and painting of the buildings, because we've covered that in a number of other lessons previously and in the buildings DVD. What I will do with a short series of video sequences is to show you how the drawing is first of all built up in very simple shapes, and then how we go through the painting process for the buildings themselves. So just sit back for the next minute or two and just watch how easy it is to build up the square and the buildings and the other features before we populate it with figures. Right, now it's important to avoid details in these buildings. Remember, the accent is all about the figures in this picture. The buildings are just a simplified backdrop. So remember all the time, simplify wherever possible. Right, now there we are. You can see that the picture, when built up in simple stages like that, really isn't complex at all. It's just a series of straight lines for the most part for the windows and the doors and the verticals of the buildings. Now normally I wouldn't get to this stage in a watercolour painting without having a clear idea of where the figures were going to go. Now you've seen me use the acetate sheet several times before, and it's the same idea. You can see here that I've drawn in a figure, just a very simple outline of a young lady walking away towards this corner of the square, and her position in the picture would really be somewhere on that sort of line. So if we use that ruler as the eye line, the young lady's position with her head on that eye line would be approximately there. A much cheaper, in fact almost a free alternative, is just any piece of acetate that you can cut from some sort of packaging. Now you can see here I've done a very simple skeleton outline of the arms and legs. One of them is reading a book and the other one sort of sitting generally chatting, and I'll put them roughly in the position where that first bench is. You can see that the figures overall are slightly bigger, even though they're sitting down, they're slightly bigger than this lady here in the middle distance. This is where, of course, you don't have to worry about the eye line, because anybody who's small, a child or somebody who's sitting down, is obviously going to be below that eye line. And again, you can see the eye line, or the head, is approximately on that eye line there. So that looks about right. Right, now in this corner of the square there's actually a little alleyway. It's quite a busy thoroughfare, and this is where I want the shaft of light shining through onto the rest of the square and onto these cafe tables here. Now I want people to understand that this is a little alleyway, a little thoroughfare, and not just a dead-end corner. And to further emphasize that point, what I'm going to do is think about putting a couple walking together hand in hand, again on the eye line, that much smaller than these middle distance figures, but clearly walking towards that little opening and this little thoroughfare. Now here's a figure that I've put in based on this figure here in the left hand side of the square. I could put him here, but I think he'd perhaps block out the view. He's too much in your face just there, and so we could perhaps put him there. Again, that sort of is a little bit in your face, but coming from this side. So let's try him here, and in this position I think it works because he's far enough out of the picture not to block your view through to this part of the square. And now at the same time we've got another little street off the square here, and it would be so easy for your eyes to go to these figures here and then feed straight out of the picture down this street. So if we put him somewhere there like that, then it's actually acting as a visual block down this street and is just generally wandering along at his own pace. And that's fine because it then gives a variety of movement for the figure. Here we got the movement of somebody who's thinking about buying something. Here we have figures who are fairly briskly walking to or from wherever they're going to. We've got a couple of figures here who are quite relaxed sitting down, and here we've got a chap who, whether he's on his mobile phone or whatever he's doing, is meandering along at a nice steady pace, in no hurry with the world whatsoever. Right, now there's an important but subtle lesson here when you're composing a picture with figures. First of all, make sure each figure in the picture actually contributes to the picture. Ask yourself each time, what would happen if that figure was missing from the picture? Would it be better or worse? So you can see that each of these figures all serves a purpose in the picture, and it all goes towards creating a nice, interesting group of figures, each of whom is contributing something specific to the picture. Right, now what I'm going to do is to just mark the figures quite simply, one by one. Just a little pencil mark gives me an idea where they are. As you've seen before with previous tutorials, I'm just going to paint in the base colours of the main buildings, and so I get a nice smooth transition, because I want to keep this nice and simple. I'm going to dampen each of these wall areas first. Right, now you can see all I'm doing is putting pale washes of raw sienna, a bit of permanent rose and light red, and I'm just greying them off here and there with streaks of ultramarine blue to give a bit of added texture. And you see where I'm adding the building colour in between what would be gaps in the trees. Right, I've just decided that, having not put a window on this area here, that there was a rather large space that perhaps needed a little bit more interest without it getting too complicated. I don't want it down too far. I want this area quite light and bright, because that's where the sun's coming through the passageway. See how simply I'm treating those windows, and I'm not really going to put much more detail in than that. And you can see now that the silhouette has started to appear. I'm doing this very, very freely. If I leave any bits and pieces that are white, then that's fine, because that will add to the sense of highlights. Right, now for some of that lemon yellow, and it's mainly on this side of the tree where these leaves and branches are facing out towards the sun. Right, now I've added a very pale wash of raw sienna across the square, and I've just put a few streaks in of ultramarine blue and mixed with a tiny touch of light red. I've just left a little bit of a gap near the bottom of the wall, just to emphasize how this light is going to come streaming through this alleyway. You can see we've got some really dark areas there, which tend to be in the middle of the tree where the light can't get at. We'll just bring them across there, and of course by doing that it helps enormously to position the tree here and push the buildings back and these windows back to the far side of the square, and the same with this building here. Right, now for the first time in the picture I'm going to use a smaller brush just to put in some of the arms and legs and faces with skin colour. Her arms uncovered, he's got a short sleeve shirt on, she's got a sleeveless top of some sort. Right, I've just filled this figure in here of the lady who's getting tonight's tea, but here I've put some figures in, or just they're blobs, aren't they, and a few little streaks for the arms. Blank some of them out. I don't want them coming too far forward. I want to send them back a little bit. This face is going to be closer, so it's going to be a little bit stronger in colour. And we mustn't forget her husband, must we, who's sitting waiting patiently to finish her shopping. Now she's got long trousers on, but there's just a hint of her feet showing below the length of the trousers, so we'll just put that in. Now I've just gone back to this figure here because she has two arms, and I've forgotten to put the other one in. Now I've mixed a shadow colour of ultramarine blue, permanent rose and a touch of light red. There it is there. It's these two colours here and a light red, just a dab of it, just to grey it off so it's not quite so brilliant. We don't want it too vibrant. You can see that you can virtually create whatever sort of shadow you want when trees are involved, and that's precisely what I'm doing. And I'm just lightening the shadow off towards the outer edges, because shadows are much stronger when they first emerge from whatever's casting a shadow. That's why I put some blue. You can see there's more blue in that part of the shadow than there is this, and I'll manufacture some shadow there as if that's coming off the awning or that little umbrella. The reason I'm doing that, of course, is that it'll help to make this lady stand out here. Right, now you can see I've just let the brush dance around here, there and everywhere with this fruit. I've painted this young lady in a bright red or bright pink pair of short trousers, knee-length trousers, and I'm just painting now a hint of this sort of shopping bag. Now I'm just putting a little flick of hint of shadow. I know it's not there, but it just helps to bed the figure down onto the pavement. That gives some clear shadow on the right hand side of her body, so that it's quite clear there's bright sunlight coming in from the left hand side. We'll just put on her white skirt, we'll just put a little bit of hits. Same with the legs there, it's this little bit of shadow cast. Now you can see I've just put the hair on the lady's head and just left that little halo on top, just as if the sun's catching it. And similarly, I've left a little halo on the back of her skirt and just here and there in the back. I've just dropped a little bit of blue back into the front, which would be in shadow, and I've done the same with this grey skirt. He's got a pair of pale blue jeans on and a yellow top. You can just see the outline of his arm. Another one with jeans on, but this time it's rather easier to see because this guy's in sunlight. Now for the girl's top, I think we'll put some burnt umber in for the shadow. She's got a little red baseball cap on, not too bright. There's a little bit of hair sticking out from underneath it. I suppose really she should have a little bit of shadow on her face. Now you can see that leg that's crossed over there, and this one that goes underneath like that. We'll just put a little bit of shadow there, just really to define the different parts of his body. Right, now you can see I've just painted the gentleman here on his mobile phone. I've just put some raw sienna stripes and then just dragged it across with the brush to give an impression of check, and then I've just put in some of that purple colour. I've done it wet in wet. It's the shadow colour on this side. He's on his mobile phone, trying to persuade the wife that he won't be late home for tea, but he might just stop off the nearest bar for another scoop or two. So there we are. I'm going to leave it at that now. You see that it's not difficult putting figures into a scene, and by populating the scene it makes it much more believable than what would otherwise be a completely dead empty square, attractive though it is. But hopefully with the combination of all those little individual figures that we've looked at previously in the individual exercises, I'll give you the confidence now not only how to paint a particular figure in a particular pose, but also I hope you've learned from this where you would put figures in. And remember, above all, have a reason for putting every figure in your picture. Make up in your own mind little stories. This young couple who've got only eyes for each other, this old chap here who's spinning another yarn to his wife on the mobile phone, and so on. When you do that, each time you paint a figure, it'll be more convincing and more believable in the picture than if you just plonk it somewhere just for the sake of it. So have a go at this, and I'm sure in no time at all you'll be producing very believable and authentic looking figures in a nice scene such as this in Venice.